Well, good day, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Isn't Canada Wonderful? I'm Jose, and this is Survival NS. And today, our topic is government waste. And more specifically, it's all about how our government waste our tax dollars. Have you ever wondered why we have a broken healthcare system? Or why people can't afford groceries? Why they can't afford a home, rent, gas, home heating? Well, it's not because we don't have the money to fix all that. I mean, here in Canada we have a population of 40 million people, and we have the ninth highest GDP in the world at 2.1 trillion. So you'd figure we should be able to fix these problems, shouldn't we? Well, where are our tax dollars going then if we can't fix these problems? Well, stick around and I'll walk you through it.
I never really know what's going on.
So let's start with the most recent giveaway, and that was $5.3 billion we decided to give the UN and the Philippines towards their own climate change initiatives. Now, it's not enough that our government puts its citizens in the poorhouse by taxing us to death in order to change the world's climate change problems. Now, Canada's footprint on the global scale when it comes to the fossil fuel footprint is a tiny fraction of the entire world. I mean, it's like Bambi fighting Godzilla. Another issue we have is the top-heavy government. Now, since 2015, when Trudeau took over, he has increased our federal workforce by 40% to a total of 98,000 more federal workers. And even through the pandemic, when businesses were going down and people were being laid off, our government continued to increase our federal employees. Now, when you take 98,000 personnel with an average salary, say, of about $50,000, that comes out to about $5 billion. Yeah, $5 billion. Did we really need to increase our federal workforce by 40%? I mean, Elon Musk took over Twitter and cut 90% of the workforce, and guess what? It's still fully functional and it's generating a ton of revenue. Can we not do the same with our government? Now let's take the most recent pandemic. Our government spent $211 billion in federal payments to people who were laid off. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I believe for the most case, that these payments were necessary in order to keep the government and the country afloat. However, you would think that our federal paymasters and accountants would be on the ball when it comes to our federal tax-paying coffers. Well, if you thought that, you were wrong. We sent $4.6 billion to ineligible recipients, and another $27.4 billion of which the government is investigating and has come out and publicly stated that a large portion of that is not worth even investigating. So, to date, we have recovered $2.3 billion, and $15.5 billion is still outstanding, for which the government says it's not worth trying to recover. $15.5 billion, like puff, gone, like Puff the Magic Dragon gone. You know, the government, they throw out big numbers like 10 billion, 20 billion, 500 million, whatever. And we just don't even seem to think anything of it. I mean, it just becomes commonplace. Like, what if you took that money, right, and you put it into context? Would it then make a difference? Well, let's take $15.5 billion. How many hospitals could you build for $15.5 billion? Well, let's consider that the average cost of a fully functional hospital in a major city goes for $211 million. You could build 139 hospitals. Don't you think that would put a dent in our healthcare crisis? Well, what about doctors? Now, we know we have such a huge shortage of doctors here in Canada. And take $15.5 billion, and given that the average salary of a doctor in Canada is $274,000, folks, that's 55,000 doctors we could have hired. Well, wouldn't that put a dent into the healthcare system? Now, I know some people are thinking, well, we don't have 55,000 doctors to hire in Canada. Well, let me tell you something. We have a large portion of folks in the medical services that have come to Canada and cannot work simply because of bureaucratic red tape holding them up. And there are plenty of doctors and healthcare workers overseas who are just waiting for the chance to come to Canada and work here to make a better life for themselves and their families. So, yeah, I believe we could hire another 55,000 doctors. Now, last year, we had a federal strike here for which 120,000 federal Treasury workers went on strike for better pay. And they went on strike for 2 weeks. Now, as everybody pretty much knows, if you belong to a union and you go on strike, you stop receiving your normal salary, and what you instead get is what they call strike pay, which usually goes between 50 and 75 bucks a day. Now, these federal workers went on strike for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, they came to a settlement with the federal government, which turned out to be about 12% for 4 years, which, don't get me wrong, kind of sounds reasonable. Others may disagree. But the government also decided to go above and beyond and give 120,000 workers a one-time bonus of $2,500. That was supposedly to cover off their lost wages while they were on strike. Yeah. Now think about that for a minute. So, in essence, what the federal government actually did is they paid these 120,000 workers $2,500 to go on strike in order to get even higher wages. Make that make sense. You know, that turned out to be 300 million tax-paying dollars. Yeah. So the next time you go on strike, don't forget to ask for your one-time bonus as well. Let me know how you make out. Oh, and who can forget the ArriveCan debacle? Now, for those of you who don't know, the ArriveCan app is a digital platform on your cell phone which contains your travel information and your JAB certificates. I have to be careful not to say the V word, or Trudeau's henchmen will be coming for me and hauling me off to jail. But anyways, this app initial cost was $80,000, which some folks say was pretty steep to begin with. Now, I'm not going to go through all the rigmaroles here of how we got there, but the end result was this app ended up costing $54 million. Let me say that again. An app on your phone cost our government $54 million. Now, as most of you know, they were about to have parliamentary investigation on this app. But just like every other scandal that we have here in Canada, Trudeau, his Liberals, and the NDP and the Bloc, they shut it down. Just like every other scandal. Now, an independent body decided that they were going to investigate this. And what they found was that 73% of the contractors hired to work on this app never did a single hour's work. Yeah, 73%. $54 million. The other thing they found out is they went out and hired a techie to see if he could replicate this app and how much it would cost. So this techie went to work, and guess what? He replicated the app in 48 hours and stated the app should cost no more than $40,000. Again, let me emphasize, $54 million for an app on your phone. Isn't Canada wonderful? And let's not forget the federal election that Trudeau decided to call in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. Yep. Now, think about that. We've got an economy that's circling the drain. World markets are crashing. People losing their jobs. Businesses tanking. And travel restrictions everywhere. Yet, we've got time for a federal election. Think about that. You've got family and friends dying, but we've got time for a federal election? Like that's our priority? WTF, please, folks. In the end, how much did that cost our taxpayers? Nah, just a measly $610 million, which, in the end, changed absolutely nothing in the federal political footprint of Canada. Everything remained exactly the same as it was before they called the election. $610 million for absolutely nothing. Let that sink in. Now, just before I close out this segment, I just want to touch on our generous handouts that we give to other countries. Now, we just recently increased our handouts by $8.3 billion. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm all for helping out the impoverished nations of the world to help them to get up on their feet. Now, try and digest this for a minute. We handed out $254 million to a country with no national debt, and another $203 million to a country with the third fastest growing global economy. Does that make sense? Now, here's one of our best examples of generosity. Now, our government has been giving $50 to $60 million to a UN agency called UNRWA. Now, UNRWA is an agency which is a part of the United Nations, which is specifically put together to help the Palestinian cause for humanitarian reasons, of course. Now, until recently, if you've been paying attention to the news, you would know that some members of this organization actually had a hand in the 7th of October attack on Israel. Yes, No word of a lie, folks. This is true. Now, unlike most other countries, after finding out this information, decided to cut funding to this organization, Canada, in all its wisdom, decided to increase their funding to this organization to a tune of $100 million. Is that not wonderful? I mean, seriously, folks. Isn't Canada wonderful? But seriously, folks, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to government waste and our tax dollars. I mean, I could go on and on, but I don't want this video dragging on. I could give you all kinds of examples. However, let's face it, when you hear our government say, well, these issues are going to take time to tackle and to solve, that's just a whole bunch of BS. I mean, if you took all the government waste that I've just explained, never mind all the other ones, and took that money and put it towards all those problems, we'd have everything fixed. Seriously, without a doubt, I believe we would have everything fixed. But that is certainly not the case. I mean, let's face it here. We've got a guy running our country who stated, when asked what he was going to do about the federal budget, he stated, I don't really worry too much about budgets because budgets, they just balance themselves. Balance themselves? Wow. I guess you and I have been doing things wrong all along. I guess I'll go and see if my budget has balanced itself since last I checked. Anyways, listen, if you like this video and you want to see more of this type, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Take care, and we'll see you soon again.